Prince Alexander stood by the tall windows of Kensington Palace, watching the autumn leaves fall in the courtyard below. His hands trembled slightly as he held the medical report that would change everything. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floor, but all he could think about was the conversation he'd had with his wife, Princess Elena, just hours before. Elena had always been the strongest person he knew. When they first met at university, she was studying medicine while he was learning about royal duties and constitutional law. She had dreams of becoming a doctor, of helping people, of making a real difference in the world. But love had changed both their paths, and she had embraced royal life with grace and determination. Now, at 38, Elena was facing the biggest challenge of her life. The diagnosis had come as a complete shock. For months, she had been feeling tired, experiencing headaches, and having trouble concentrating. Everyone, including the royal doctors, had attributed it to stress. Being a mother to 3 young children while carrying out hundreds of royal engagements each year was exhausting for anyone. But the truth was much more serious. Elena had been diagnosed with a rare neurological condition that would progressively affect her memory and cognitive abilities. The doctors explained that while treatments existed to slow the progression, there was no cure. She might have good days and bad days, but over time, the condition would worsen. Alexander remembered the moment Elena told him about the diagnosis. They were sitting in their private sitting room at Adelaide Cottage, their country home. The children had just gone to bed after a typical evening of homework help, bedtime stories, and goodnight kisses. Elena had been quiet during dinner, and he knew something was troubling her. "Alex," she had said, using the private nickname she'd called him since their dating days. "We need to talk about something important." Her voice was steady, but he could see the fear in her eyes. As she explained the medical situation, Alexander felt his world crumbling. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were supposed to grow old together, watch their children graduate, get married, have children of their own. They were supposed to serve the country for decades to come, supporting each other through all the challenges that royal life would bring. "What does this mean for the children?" was his first question after the initial shock wore off. Their 3 children, Prince James, age 12, Princess Isabella, age 10, and Prince Michael, aged 7, were the center of their universe. Everything they did was guided by their desire to give their children as normal a childhood as possible while preparing them for their future roles. Elena had thought about this too. "We need to tell them," she said quietly. "But we need to do it in a way that doesn't scare them. They need to understand that Mummy is sick, but that we're going to face this together as a family." The palace had managed to keep the diagnosis private for now, but both Alexander and Elena knew that eventually the public would need to know. Elena's condition would affect her ability to carry out royal duties, and there would be questions about her reduced public appearances. That morning, Alexander had met with his private secretary, his communications team, and senior palace officials to discuss how to handle the situation. The meeting had been difficult. Everyone was trying to be professional, but the emotion was evident. Elena was beloved by the palace staff, and many of them had worked with her for over 15 years. "Your Royal Highness," his private secretary, Sir David, had said gently, "we need to consider how this will affect the children's schooling, their public appearances, and their understanding of their future roles." Alexander nodded, but inside, he was struggling. How do you prepare children for a future where their mother might not remember their names? How do you maintain a sense of normalcy when everything is falling apart? The irony wasn't lost on him that Elena, who had given up her medical career to support him and the monarchy, was now facing a medical condition that would rob her of the very mind that had made her such an exceptional student and, later, such a thoughtful and intelligent royal. He thought about all the times Elena had supported him through difficult moments in his royal duties. When his grandfather, the previous king, had died, Elena had been his rock. When he had struggled with the pressure of public scrutiny, she had reminded him of the importance of their work and the difference they could make in people's lives. Now it was his turn to be strong for her, but he wasn't sure he knew how. The palace courtyard was filling with staff arriving for the morning shift. Life was going on as normal for everyone else, but for Alexander, everything had changed. He knew that by the end of the day, their children would know about Elena's condition. Tomorrow, they would begin the process of adjusting royal duties and schedules. Within weeks, they would probably need to make a public announcement. But right now, in this quiet moment before the storm, Alexander allowed himself to grieve for the future they had planned and would never have. He thought about Elena's laugh, her quick wit, her ability to remember every person she met and make them feel special. He thought about how she helped their children with homework, patiently explaining math problems, and listening to them read. All of this might slip away, bit by bit, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Sir." It was his valet. "Her Royal Highness is ready to meet with you and the children in the garden room." Alexander straightened his shoulders, wiped his eyes, and prepared to be the husband and father his family needed him to be. The conversation ahead would be one of the most important of their lives, and despite his own heartbreak, he knew he had to be strong. As he walked through the palace corridors toward the garden room, he could hear the children's voices and Elena's gentle responses. She was asking them about their school day, just as she always did. For a moment, everything seemed normal. But Alexander knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The garden room at Kensington Palace had always been Elena's favorite place for family conversations. Sunshine streamed through the large windows, illuminating the comfortable sofas where the family often gathered for weekend morning talks or evening story time. Today, however, the usual cheerful atmosphere felt heavy with unspoken words. Prince James, Princess Isabella, and Prince Michael sat on the large cream sofa, their school uniforms slightly rumpled from the day. They had been told that Mummy and Papa needed to have an important family discussion, but none of them could have imagined what was coming. Elena had spent hours thinking about how to have this conversation. She had consulted with child psychologists, read books about talking to children about serious illness, and even sought advice from other families who had faced similar challenges. But nothing could have fully prepared her for the moment when she would have to tell her children that their mother was sick. "My darlings," Elena began, sitting across from them with Alexander beside her. "Papa and I need to talk to you about something very important, something that's going to affect our whole family." James, the eldest, immediately sensed the seriousness in his mother's voice. At 12, he was beginning to understand that being part of the royal family meant dealing with challenges that other families didn't face. He had already started learning about constitutional duties and had begun attending some public events with his parents. "Are you and Papa getting divorced?" Isabella asked suddenly, her 10-year-old mind jumping to one of the few serious family situations she could imagine. She had friends at school whose parents had separated, and it was her biggest fear. "No, sweetheart," Alexander said quickly, reaching out to take Isabella's hand. "Mama and I love each other very much, and we love all of you very much. This is about something else entirely." Elena took a deep breath. "I've been to see some doctors recently because I haven't been feeling very well. Do you remember how I've been having headaches and feeling tired?" All three children nodded. They had noticed their mother seemed different lately, though they couldn't quite put their finger on what was wrong. "Well, the doctors have found out why I've been feeling unwell. I have something called a neurological condition. That's a big word that means there's something wrong with how my brain works." 7-year-old Michael's eyes grew wide. "Does that mean you're going to die?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena felt her heart break a little at the fear in her youngest son's voice. She moved to sit beside him, pulling him into her lap. "No, my brave boy. This doesn't mean I'm going to die. But it does mean that over time, my brain might not work as well as it used to. I might forget things sometimes, or I might get confused more easily." "Like Grandmama Rose?" Isabella asked. She remembered Alexander's grandmother, who had lived with dementia in her final years. "It's similar to what happened with Grandmama Rose, but not exactly the same," Alexander explained. "The doctors are going to give Mama medicine that will help slow down the changes, and we're going to do everything we can to help her stay healthy and happy." James had been quiet during this exchange, processing the information. As the future heir, he had always been more aware of family responsibilities and the weight of royal duties. "Will this affect your royal work, Mama?" he asked. Elena smiled at her eldest son's thoughtfulness. Even at 12, he understood that their family's responsibilities extended beyond their personal lives. "Yes, darling. I won't be able to do as many public engagements as I used to. I might need to step back from some of my charities and organizations. But I'll keep working as long as I can, and Papa will take on more duties to help." "What about us?" Michael asked. "Will we still be able to do things together?" "Of course," Elena assured him. "We'll still have family dinners, still go on holiday together, still help you with your homework. Some things might change, but the most important thing, how much we love you, will never change." Isabella was struggling to understand the full implications. "But if you forget things, will you forget us?" This was the question Elena had been dreading most. She looked into her daughter's worried eyes and chose her words carefully. I will always love you, even if my brain doesn't work the same way. Love isn't something that lives just in our memory. It lives in our hearts. And my heart will always know that you three are the most precious things in my life. Alexander watched his wife handle these impossible questions with such grace and wisdom. He knew how much this conversation was costing her emotionally, but she was putting the children's needs first, just as she always did. Are people going to know about this? James asked. Will it be in the newspapers? Eventually, yes, Alexander answered. We'll need to tell the public about Mama's condition. But first, we wanted to make sure you three knew and understood what was happening. We'll also talk to your schools and your friends' parents so they know how to support you. The room fell quiet as the children absorbed this information. Finally, Isabella spoke up. Can we help take care of Mama? Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. You already do take care of me, just by being yourselves. But, yes, there might be times when you can help me remember things or help Papa with family activities. Like when Grandpapa needed help remembering where he put his glasses? Michael asked, referring to Alexander's father, who had recently started experiencing some age-related memory issues. Exactly like that, Elena said, relieved that the children could relate this to something familiar. James, showing maturity beyond his years, stood up and came to sit beside his mother. We're a team, he said simply. We'll figure this out together. His words seemed to unlock something in his younger siblings. Isabella and Michael joined the group hug that formed naturally, and, for a moment, the family just held each other close. I'm scared, Isabella admitted quietly. It's okay to be scared, Alexander told her. Mama and I are scared too. But being scared doesn't mean we can't be brave and help each other. Will other kids at school treat us differently? James asked. He was already aware that being royal made some social situations complicated. Some people might, Elena acknowledged. But your real friends will still be your real friends. And remember, there are lots of families dealing with illness or challenges. We're not alone in facing difficult things. The conversation continued for another hour, with the children asking questions and the parents providing honest, age-appropriate answers. They talked about practical things, like how Elena's condition might affect holiday plans or family traditions. They discussed emotional aspects, like how to handle sadness or frustration. Most importantly, they emphasized that they would face this challenge as a united family. As the evening grew darker, Elena suggested they order pizza for dinner, a rare treat that usually happened only on special occasions. Tonight felt like a time to break normal rules and just be together. While they waited for the food to arrive, the children curled up with Elena on the large sofa, and Alexander read aloud from one of their favorite family books. For a moment, everything felt almost normal. But, as Alexander read, he watched Elena's face and saw the sadness she was trying to hide from the children. He knew she was thinking about all the future family moments like this one that she might not fully remember. And he knew that their journey was just beginning. 3 weeks after the family conversation, the weight of keeping Elena's diagnosis private was becoming unbearable for Alexander. Every public appearance felt like a performance, every smile forced, every royal duty a reminder that their lives were about to change dramatically. The palace staff had been incredibly discreet, but Alexander could see the concern in their eyes when they thought no one was looking. Elena had good days and bad days. On good days, she seemed almost like her old self, engaging with the children's schoolwork, discussing royal schedules with her private secretary, and maintaining the warm, intelligent presence that had made her such a beloved member of the royal family. But, on bad days, she struggled to remember appointments, lost track of conversations mid-sentence, and sometimes stared out the window for long periods, seemingly lost in her own thoughts. The children were coping better than Alexander had expected, but he could see the strain on them too. James had become protective of his mother in a way that broke Alexander's heart. The 12-year-old would gently redirect conversations when Elena seemed confused and had started doing small things like bringing her tea without being asked or reminding her about upcoming events. Isabella, always the most emotionally sensitive of the three, had become quieter. She spent more time than usual in Elena's company, as if she was trying to memorize every moment. She had started writing in a journal, though she hadn't told anyone what she was recording. Michael, at 7, probably understood the situation least, but he seemed to sense that something important was happening. He had begun bringing small gifts to his mother, flowers from the palace gardens, drawings from school, or interesting rocks he found during walks. His childlike generosity was both touching and heartbreaking. The decision to go public with Elena's diagnosis came after a particularly difficult day. Elena had attended a charity event for children's literacy, one of her longtime passion projects. During her speech, she had lost her train of thought mid-sentence, standing silently at the podium for what felt like an eternity before her private secretary quietly prompted her to continue. The moment had been brief, and most attendees probably attributed it to fatigue or emotion about the cause. But Alexander knew it was more than that, and he could see in Elena's eyes afterwards that she knew it too. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Elena and Alexander sat in their private sitting room, both lost in their own thoughts. "I can't keep doing public events," Elena said quietly. "Not if I'm going to have moments like today. It's not fair to the organizations I represent, and it's not fair to the people who come to these events expecting the royal family at our best." Alexander wanted to argue with her, to insist that one difficult moment didn't mean she should stop all public work. But he knew she was right. Elena had always been a perfectionist when it came to royal duties, and the idea of not being able to perform at the level she expected of herself was devastating to her. "We need to tell the public," Alexander said. "We can't keep pretending everything is normal. And the children shouldn't have to carry the secret anymore." Elena nodded, though Alexander could see how much the decision was costing her. For 15 years, she had been the picture of royal grace and capability. The idea of the public knowing about her vulnerability was frightening. "How do we do it?" she asked. Alexander had been thinking about this for days. A statement from the palace, but also a personal message. Something that explains the situation honestly, but also shows that we're facing this as a family. People need to understand that this doesn't change who you are or how much you care about the work you've been doing. They spent the next few days working with the palace communications team to craft a statement. Every word was carefully considered, not just for public consumption, but for how it would affect their children, their extended family, and Elena herself. The statement was released on a Tuesday morning. It read, "The palace announces that Her Royal Highness Princess Elena has been diagnosed with a progressive neurological condition that will affect her cognitive abilities over time. Her Royal Highness is receiving excellent medical care and will continue to carry out royal duties as her health permits. Prince Alexander and their children are providing their full support, and the family asks for privacy as they adjust to this new chapter in their lives. Princess Elena remains committed to her charitable work and looks forward to continuing her service to the country in whatever capacity her health allows." The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media was flooded with messages of support and love for Elena and the family. Flowers began arriving at the palace gates within hours. The hashtag Courageous Elena began trending worldwide. But perhaps most meaningful were the personal messages from other families dealing with similar conditions. Parents wrote about their own struggles with neurological diseases and how Elena's openness gave them strength. Children sent drawings and letters telling Elena she was brave. The children's schools were incredibly supportive, working with the palace to ensure that James, Isabella, and Michael were protected from unwanted attention while also receiving any emotional support they might need. However, the new reality also brought challenges. Photographers began following Elena more closely, looking for signs of her condition. Tabloid newspapers speculated about her prognosis and what it meant for the future of the monarchy. Some media coverage was sensitive and respectful, but other coverage was intrusive and hurtful. One particularly difficult evening, Isabella came home from school upset because a classmate had asked her if her mother was going crazy. Alexander found her crying in her room and spent an hour helping her understand that some people don't know how to talk about illness appropriately, and that her mother's condition didn't change the fact that Elena was still the same loving, caring person she had always been. James, meanwhile, had started researching neurological conditions online, trying to understand what the family could expect in the future. Alexander was torn between being proud of his son's maturity and worried that James was taking on too much responsibility for his age. The most difficult moment came about a week after the public announcement. The family was having dinner together when Elena suddenly looked around the table with confusion. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "but I'm having trouble remembering what we were talking about." The table fell silent. This was the first time Elena's confusion had been so apparent to all the children at once. Alexander watched his children's faces, seeing their fear and sadness. It was Michael who broke the silence. "It's okay, Mama. We were just talking about my football practice tomorrow. Do you want to hear about the goal I scored today instead?" Elena smiled at her youngest son, and the conversation gradually resumed. But Alexander knew this was a preview of many similar moments to come. That night, after tucking the children into bed, Alexander found Elena standing in their bedroom, looking at family photographs on the dresser. "I'm trying to memorize everything," she said when she noticed him watching her. Their faces, their voices, the way Isabella wrinkles her nose when she laughs, the way James gets that serious expression when he's thinking about something important, the way Michael still reaches for my hand when we're walking somewhere new. Alexander joined her at the dresser, putting his arms around her from behind. "We'll take more pictures," he said. "And we'll make videos. And we'll write down all the funny things they say and all the sweet moments. We'll find ways to preserve everything that's important." Elena leaned back against him, and they stood together in comfortable silence, both knowing that they were entering uncharted territory, but determined to face it together. The public now knew their secret, but the real journey was just beginning. 6 months after going public with Elena's diagnosis, the royal family had settled into a new routine that balanced Elena's health needs with their ongoing royal responsibilities and the children's schooling. Some days were harder than others, but they had found ways to adapt that preserved the essence of their family life while acknowledging the reality of Elena's condition. Alexander had taken on many of Elena's former duties, which meant longer days and more travel. The children had adjusted their after-school activities so that at least one of them was usually home when Elena was having a difficult day. The palace staff had been retrained to provide subtle assistance to Elena during public events, and her schedule had been significantly reduced to focus only on causes closest to her heart. On this particular morning, Elena was having one of her better days. She was helping Isabella with a school project about influential women in history, and her knowledge and insights were as sharp as ever. Alexander watched them work together at the kitchen table, Elena's face animated as she discussed the importance of education for women in the 19th century. "Mama knows so much about everything," Isabella said to Alexander during a break. "Sometimes I forget she's sick at all." It was both wonderful and heartbreaking to see Elena in these moments of clarity and capability. Alexander treasured these good days, but they also made the difficult days more stark in comparison. James had started accompanying his father to more royal events, officially beginning his preparation for his future role. At 13, he was still young for such responsibilities, but the circumstances required the family to adapt their long-term plans. James took his new duties seriously, but Alexander worried about the pressure it put on his eldest son. "Papa," James said one evening after returning from a charity dinner, "some people asked me about Mama tonight. They wanted to know how she's doing and whether she'll be attending the Christmas concert next month." Alexander had been dreading these conversations. While the public had been largely supportive, there were always questions about Elena's condition and how it was affecting royal duties. "What did you tell them?" Alexander asked. "I said that Mama is doing well and that our family appreciates everyone's support." "Was that right?" Alexander felt a surge of pride in his son's diplomatic response. "That was perfect, James. You're learning to balance honesty with privacy, which is one of the most important skills in royal life." The Christmas concert James had mentioned was weighing heavily on Elena's mind. It was an annual event that she had hosted for over a decade, bringing together children's choirs from across the country to perform at Westminster Abbey. The event was filmed for television and attended by hundreds of families, many of whom had been looking forward to seeing Elena in person. Elena desperately wanted to attend, but she was worried about having a public episode similar to what had happened at the literacy charity event months earlier. The stress of public appearances sometimes seemed to make her symptoms worse, and she didn't want to disappoint the children who would be performing. "I think I should step back from the concert," Elena told Alexander one evening. "It's too important an event to risk something going wrong." Alexander understood her reasoning, but he also knew how much this particular event meant to her. "What if we modified it slightly? Maybe you could attend, but not host? Or we could pre-record parts of your participation." They eventually decided on a compromise. Elena would attend the concert and give a brief welcome to the audience, but Alexander would handle most of the hosting duties. Elena would also have a discreet support person nearby in case she needed assistance. The children were excited about the concert. Michael's school choir had been selected to participate, and Isabella was helping with the program design as part of a school art project. James would attend in his new capacity as a working member of the royal family. As the date approached, Elena experienced both anticipation and anxiety. She had been working with a speech therapist to develop techniques for staying focused during public speaking, and Her private secretary had prepared note cards with key points in case Elena lost track of her thoughts. The morning of the concert, Elena woke up feeling optimistic. Her mind felt clear, and she was looking forward to seeing the children perform. She chose one of her favorite outfits, a deep blue dress that had always made her feel confident, and spent extra time with her hair and makeup, wanting to look her best for the cameras and the families who would be attending. The Abbey was beautifully decorated for the season, with Christmas trees and holly creating a festive atmosphere. As Elena and Alexander arrived, they were greeted by the concert organizers and the choir directors. Elena chatted easily with everyone, asking thoughtful questions about the music selections and the participating schools. For the first hour of the event, everything went smoothly. Elena moved through the crowd with her usual grace, stopping to talk with families and taking pictures with excited children. She seemed relaxed and happy, and Alexander began to think their worries had been unfounded. The concert itself was magical. Children's voices filled the ancient abbey with Christmas carols and contemporary songs about hope and joy. Elena sat in the front row, clearly enjoying every moment, sometimes mouthing along with familiar songs or wiping away tears during particularly moving performances. When it came time for Elena's brief speech to close the event, she walked confidently to the microphone. The abbey fell silent as hundreds of people waited to hear from the princess they had supported through her health journey. "Good evening, everyone," Elena began, her voice clear and warm. "What a wonderful celebration of music and childhood joy we've experienced tonight." She continued for several minutes, talking about the importance of arts education and thanking the teachers, parents, and volunteers who had made the event possible. Her speech was eloquent and heartfelt, and the audience listened with obvious appreciation. But as Elena neared the end of her remarks, something shifted. She paused mid-sentence, looking out at the audience with sudden confusion. For a moment that felt like an eternity, she stood silently at the podium, clearly struggling to remember what she had been saying. Alexander felt his heart racing as he watched his wife search for words that wouldn't come. The audience remained respectfully quiet, but he could sense their concern and uncertainty. Finally, Elena looked directly into the television cameras and said simply, "Sometimes my words don't come as easily as they used to. But my love for all of you and my gratitude for the beautiful music we've heard tonight is as strong as ever. Thank you for your patience, your kindness, and for sharing this magical evening with our family." The abbey erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, clapping not just politely but with genuine warmth and emotion. Children in the choir were smiling and applauding enthusiastically. Some parents were openly crying. Elena stepped back from the microphone with tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. Alexander joined her, taking her hand as they waved to the audience together. Later that evening, as they reviewed news coverage of the event, they discovered that Elena's moment of vulnerability had actually strengthened rather than diminished public support for her. Social media was filled with messages praising her courage and authenticity. Parents shared stories of their own struggles with illness and how Elena's honesty had inspired them. "You know what?" Elena said to Alexander as they watched clips of the concert. "I think that was exactly what I needed to say, even if I didn't plan it that way." The children had been watching too, and Isabella spoke up from her spot on the sofa. "Mama, you were perfect. You showed everyone that it's okay to not be perfect, and that made it even more beautiful." Alexander looked around at his family. Elena, proud and dignified despite her struggles. James, growing into his role with wisdom beyond his years. Isabella, offering insights that amazed him. And Michael, simply happy to have been part of something special. They were different than they had been a year ago, but, in some ways, they were stronger. 1 year had passed since Elena's diagnosis became public knowledge, and the royal family was preparing to mark the anniversary with a documentary that would share their journey with the world. The idea had come from Elena herself, who wanted to help other families facing similar challenges while also providing an honest update about her condition. Elena's health had deteriorated gradually over the past months, but she remained determined to use her platform for good. Some days she needed help remembering recent conversations or finding the right words, but her core personality, her warmth, her intelligence, her deep love for her family remained unchanged. The documentary crew had been following the family for several weeks, capturing both ordinary moments and significant events. They filmed family dinners where Elena needed gentle reminders about recent conversations, homework sessions where she struggled to help with subjects she had once mastered easily, and quiet moments where she sat with each child, trying to memorize their faces and voices. I want people to see that this illness doesn't define us, Elena explained to the documentary director during one of her interviews. Yes, it's changed our lives, but it hasn't diminished our love for each other or our commitment to the work we do. Alexander had been reluctant about the documentary initially, worried about protecting Elena's privacy and dignity. But he had come to see it as an opportunity to show the reality of living with neurological illness, beyond the clinical descriptions and media speculation. People have been so supportive, he said during his own interview. But I think many of them wonder what it's really like day to day. We want to show that while this is incredibly difficult, families can find ways to adapt and stay connected to what matters most. The children had mixed feelings about participating. James, now 14, understood the public service aspect, but worried about his mother's reputation. Isabella, at 11, was protective of family privacy, but also wanted to help other children who might be facing similar situations. Michael, 8, was mostly confused about why so many people were interested in filming their ordinary activities. One of the most powerful segments of the documentary captured a family meeting where they discussed adjusting Elena's royal duties further. Her neurologist had recommended reducing her schedule even more, limiting her to perhaps one public engagement per month during her best periods. I hate the idea of letting people down, Elena said during the meeting, her frustration evident. These organizations depend on royal patronage, and I've been working with some of them for over 15 years. But you're not letting anyone down, James insisted, showing a maturity that both impressed and saddened Alexander. You're taking care of yourself, so you can keep helping for as long as possible. The documentary also followed Elena as she visited a support group for families dealing with neurological conditions. This had been one of her new initiatives, using her remaining public appearances to bring attention to resources that weren't well known to the general public. At the support group, Elena met Sarah, a mother of 3 who had been recently diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's disease. Sarah was struggling with many of the same fears that Elena had faced: how to tell her children, how to maintain her marriage, how to plan for a future that felt uncertain. The hardest part isn't the diagnosis, Sarah confided to Elena during a break in the group session. It's feeling like you're already dead to some people, like they don't know how to treat you anymore. Elena nodded with understanding. I've experienced that too. Some people become very uncomfortable around me now, as if what I have might be contagious. Others treat me like a child, speaking very slowly or avoiding complex topics. It takes patience to help people learn how to still see you as you. The documentary cameras captured Elena offering practical advice and emotional support to Sarah and other group members. Despite her own struggles, Elena's natural empathy and intelligence were clearly intact, and her presence brought comfort to others facing similar journeys. One of the most emotional moments in the documentary occurred during a private family interview. The filmmaker asked each family member what they had learned over the past year. I've learned that love doesn't depend on memory, Elena said thoughtfully. Even when I can't remember specific conversations or events, I know absolutely that I love Alexander and my children. That knowledge lives somewhere deeper than the parts of my brain that are affected by this condition. Alexander's response was more difficult for him to articulate. I've learned that strength comes in forms I never expected. Elena's courage in facing this publicly, the children's resilience in adapting to changes, my own ability to take on responsibilities I never imagined. We've all discovered capabilities we didn't know we had. James spoke about responsibility and growing up faster than he had planned. I've learned that being royal means serving others even when your own life is difficult. Watching my parents handle this situation with dignity has taught me more about leadership than any formal education could. Isabella talked about the importance of expressing love while you can. I've started telling Mama I love her every day and writing down funny things that happened so maybe we can remember them later. I've learned not to take ordinary moments for granted. Michael, in his 8-year-old wisdom, simply said, I've learned that Mama is still Mama, even when her brain is different sometimes. The documentary's final segment was filmed at the palace 6 months later, showing how the family's routines had evolved. Elena now had a full-time aide who helped her navigate daily activities, but she remained involved in family life and selected royal duties. Alexander had hired additional staff to help manage his increased responsibilities while ensuring he remained available to his family. The children had adapted remarkably well. James was taking on more official duties, and excelling academically despite the additional pressures. Isabella had started volunteering with a charity that supported families dealing with illness, channeling her experiences into helping others. Michael continued to be the family's source of joy and spontaneity, often making Elena laugh with his innocent observations and boundless energy. "We're not the same family we were 2 years ago," Alexander reflected in the documentary's closing interview. "But we're still a family that loves each other deeply, supports each other through difficulties, and tries to use our platform to make a positive difference in the world." Elena's final words in the documentary became widely quoted. "This illness has taken some things from me, but it's also shown me what truly cannot be taken. The love of my family, the meaning we find in serving others, the grace that comes from facing difficulty with dignity. These things are stronger than any disease." When the documentary aired, it was watched by over 20 million people in the UK alone and was broadcast internationally. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many viewers sharing how the royal family's openness had helped them in their own struggles with illness, family challenges, or finding strength during difficult times. More importantly, the documentary sparked conversations about neurological illness, increased funding for research, and led to new support programs for affected families. Elena's decision to share their journey publicly had created a legacy that would outlast her illness. In quiet moments, when the cameras were gone and the public attention had faded, the royal family continued their daily routine of love, adaptation, and hope. They didn't know what the future would bring, but they faced it together, one day at a time, with the knowledge that they had already survived the unimaginable and found ways to thrive despite the challenges. Their story became one not just of illness and loss, but of resilience, love, and the extraordinary strength that ordinary families can find when they face the extraordinary together.